Welcome back. I hope you've fitting well this afternoon. I'm Mike Gray, Capability and Resourcing Manager at Health Education England. Thanks for joining this afternoon's Tackling Imposter Syndrome, You Are More Than Just Luck, on the second afternoon of NHS Project Futures Festival 2022. Just before I hand over to Rachel, may I just let you know the format of the virtual event. A game code will have been given on the screen at the beginning of this session for arriving on time. You can write this down in the Notes tab on the right-hand side of the screen. You'll be given a game code at the end of the session. Towards the end of Rachel's presentation, there will be an opportunity to go through Q&As. I will now introduce Rachel. Rachel has worked in project and programme management for over 25 years, mostly within the NHS and education sector, as well as her current role as PMO. She also leads the Project Management Capability Development Programme for Nottingham and Nottinghamshire ICS PMO, the Coaching and Mentoring Workstream for NHS Project Futures, and writes Coaching Corner for the Project Futures Update newsletter. A qualified executive and leadership coach, mentor, Rachel is passionate about the role coaching and mentoring can play in developing people's confidence and capability and achieving their potential. Good afternoon, Rachel, and thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Hi everyone. Hi Mike. Thanks for the intro. So just say hello to everyone that's come along. Thank you for making the time to come. As Mike's mentioned, I write the Coaching Corner update in the quarterly update newsletter, and imposter syndrome is one of the things that I've been wanting to tackle, for no pun intended, for you guys for quite a while. But unfortunately, one column isn't enough to do it justice. And every time I do something on one of the Compass events, or when I did Be Your Own Coach a few compasses ago, imposter syndrome comes up a lot. So I was really keen to be able to put a session on for you so that I could give it a bit more time and do a bit of justice to it for you. So I hope that today's session will answer some of the questions that have been sent in about it, and I hope it will help you get a bit of a better understanding of where it comes from and kind of what you can do about it. But most of all, and probably the message I'll repeat at the end, is I really want people to take away the fact that you are not alone. It affects many more people than we think it does. So just want to move on to my first slide. So imposter syndrome has been kicking around for a while. I was surprised to learn when I first started looking into it a few years ago that it's been imposter syndrome as an expression, as a word, has been with us since the late 1970s, actually 1978. It's first identified by two academics. I never know how to say this lady's surname, so if anybody knows it, I'm terribly sorry. Susanna Imes, or Imers, and Pauline Clance. So they, through their research, were working together and then realised that they both had these same fears and both had these same thoughts. So they did a bit more study, opened the study up a bit wider, and discovered that what they then coined a phrase for and called imposter syndrome was actually a thing, if you like, and it mostly affected high achieving women. However, my caveat on this is, having done research myself in the past, is I think there might have been a little bit of bias in there in the selection of the sample and the group of people that they worked with, and they were high achieving women, and I suspect they were looking for it in high achieving women. So that's how it got that sort of moniker at the time, I think. But since then, and even more so in the last decade, it's become apparent that it affects men just as much. And I would actually extend that, and I would say that it's not just high achievers. I think you can, and I think that kind of comes from the phrase that pretty much 99% plus of all high achievers, be they men or women, will have experienced imposter syndrome at some time in their lives or in their career. But that doesn't mean to say it only affects high achievers. I think a more accurate way to look at it is that everybody will achieve it experience it at some point in their working life. You don't have to become a high achiever. Just moving jobs or a promotion, or moving to an organisation that you don't know very well, that can start to trigger imposter syndrome. And I think one of the most important things to say about it as well is it's not a mental health condition. It's a syndrome. It's a phenomenon. It's not a mental health illness. It's not a mental health condition. Although it can drive you in extreme cases, driven by the fear, it can cause anxiety, it can cause stress. And if that goes to its extreme, it can cause you to burn out. Now, all of those things, if you're experiencing them to a point that they're having a major impact and disrupting your working life on a day-to-day basis, then that is an instance if someone comes to me for coaching where I would say, actually, I think, you need to go and speak to your GP, because the way it's affecting you isn't good for your mental health, and you need some extra support in addition to me as a coach. So having made that caveat, so when people come, very often people don't realize it's imposter syndrome they've got, and we'll be talking about different scenarios, different situations, and it generally comes from a place where people feel, that they've lost some confidence or they don't have confidence. And that's a very common, sort of expression of imposter syndrome, if you like. Some of the thoughts that, people say to me, they'll say, oh, I was in this meeting. It was, full of all these like senior leaders or senior managers. And I just had that moment where it was just, what am I doing here? I don't deserve to be here. And I couldn't shake off that thought. Other things that people will say is, if they are highly respected, they're an expert in what they do, or they work in a field where you need a lot of experience. Quite often people will say, I'm really not as good as people say I am. They'll have done some particularly good pieces of work. They'll have been asked to present on things, speak about things. And, this underlying thought is that I'm really not as good as people say I am. What am I doing here? I don't deserve to be here. And then the classic one that we know, if you know anything about imposter syndrome, you will immediately say that's the thought that we use to define it, but it's so much more than that. And that creates that sneaking suspicion, total fraud. Sooner or later, I'm going to be found out. If I do this presentation, someone's going to ask me a question and I'm not going to know the answer, and that's okay because nobody knows the answer to everything. But I'm going to get found out, that I don't know anything, that I'm not as good as people say, I shouldn't be here, I don't belong here, everyone is so much better than me. The curse of comparison, comparing yourself to other people who may be feeling exactly the same as you behind the mask. They're just hiding it exceptionally well, as you probably are as well. And then when you've delivered a piece of work or, spoken about something or, asked a question in a meeting that someone says, oh, yeah, that was a really good question, or, or a really great piece of work, really good presentation. And that little nagging thought inside you is thinking, oh, I didn't deserve that praise. Oh, no, I don't know where that came from. That's not me they're talking about. Lots of different thoughts. So you may have other thoughts to that are specific to you that tie into sort of similar feelings, if you like. So I've got the first of two polls here just to kind of get a feeling about you guys, because obviously it's a bit tricky in the platform situations. I can't see any of you, so I can't see your faces, I can't see how you're reacting, can't see what you're feeling. So I have a poll for you. It's going to pop up onto the screen. And I'm really interested to know if you've ever experienced imposter syndrome at work. So that will start to pop up shortly. And I'm particularly interested at work because imposter syndrome doesn't normally affect our whole life at the same time. So you may experience imposter syndrome at work, but in the rest of your life, you're fine. You may play sports, at a competitive level, whether that's amateur or even up to semi-pro, and you're fine with that. You never have an issue with that. That's absolutely fine, and it's just the work thing. That's particularly what I wanted to know about at work. So I'll give you a few more seconds or so to start to fill it in, and then we'll ask for the results. One thing while you're thinking about your answer is I wanted to show you this slide that I think is absolutely brilliant, and I have this stuck on my wall. And it just sums it up. And particularly what I was saying before, everybody gets imposter syndrome at some point, and that is okay. We all experience it. And I think the thing to do is about, understanding how to recognize it and kind of what you can do about it. So we've got many results coming through, Mike. How's it looking? I think Chris was going to share the screen for us.
Yeah, we have indeed. Thanks, Rachel.
That's a bit
Yeah,
tall for me. I can't see it.
yeah, it's okay. No, we've got nearly 60% of people that have voted are saying often or all the time. So all the time, 15 to 17%, often over 40%, sometimes 35%, rarely less than 7% of people, and there isn't anyone that's voted to say never. So it really looks like it's the sometimes, the often, all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not surprised about the never. I felt I had to put that in to make it a fair kind of poll, but I've kind of figured that if you weren't experiencing imposter syndrome, you probably wouldn't want to come along and find out more about it. So the never I'm not quite so surprised about. But yeah, it is a tricky one once it starts to get a hold, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. 43% often.
Yeah, once it starts to get hold, you'll find yourself often thinking it, particularly as well if you've just come into a new role, you know, and you're just trying to find your feet and, you know, find your place with it. So it's not unusual to feel it very often, and it's not unusual to feel it most of the time. Like I say, we're going to have a bit of a look at, you know, what's going on, and what you can sort of start to do to try and, you know, get some of it under control, because not all of us want to go off and have a coaching session. So these are going to be some of the things that you can do yourself. So let's move on to the next slide. So some of the signs, no doubt, that you will be experiencing that, you know, that have driven, you know, your answer is you'll tell yourself you got lucky when actually really, you know, you worked really hard. You put a lot of time into that piece of work. You put a lot of time into that presentation. You put a lot of time into that project. But when the praise starts coming, you know, you'll just fob it off. And quite often you'll say, I just got lucky. It's like, oh, well, no, it wasn't, you know, it's fine. And there's a fine line between being humble about something or having humility about something and about brushing it off to that extent. You know, you brush off that praise because you find it really, really difficult to accept. You know, it actually makes you feel physically uncomfortable to actually accept the praise. You feel so uncomfortable with it. You're like, okay. Some of the signs as well is perfectionism. Is often, you know, quite apparent in imposter syndrome as well. You're measuring yourself against extremely high standards, and most of the time, in fact nearly all the time, you are setting those standards. You are giving yourself your extremely high standards. It's not the expectation of everybody else. And sometimes being able to have a conversation, you know, even if it's sort of with your line manager or with a trusted colleague, can really help. I used to, hence my interest in imposter syndrome, I used to suffer from it a lot, still do now, you know. 10 minutes before this presentation started, I'm downstairs in the kitchen getting a drink, saying to my husband, oh my God, I won't be any good. But it caught it, dealt with it, and here I am. So it happens. But I remember my manager saying to me, as a manager, probably going back about 10 years now, and he was very good actually. One of his managers is quite to the point. And he said to me, you know what, Rachel? He said, the thing that you struggle with the most, he said, is you set yourself really high standards. And he said, you push too far for that perfectionism, because I'd started to miss a few deadlines and things like that. And he said, if you just took Rachel's 85%, he said, you know, or even Rachel's 80%, he said, that would be fine by the rest of us. He said, you just set that bar a little bit too high. So I started thinking consciously, and it was really hard. I won't tell that to you that it's easy. It wasn't, to start to lower my expectations a little bit. And it took a long time, and I still catch myself now thinking, actually, no, just, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, and, you know, just take it down a level. And that perfectionism will often then drive a fear of failure. That fear of failure will stop you starting a piece of work. So not only have you got perfectionism on one side, you've then got a bit of procrastination going on as well. Because if you start, you know, you don't want to start, you know, that fear is just like, oh no, you know, I can't start. And then you get towards, you know, you're rapidly running out of time now. You may avoid taking on new work. You may avoid certain situations or certain meetings. You might, you know, sort of feel, you know, I can't do a presentation. I don't want to do a presentation. I'll make an excuse or so on. So those are some of the signs. Like I say, they're not all of the signs, but some of the most common things that, people will talk to me about, this is how they're feeling, this is what they're thinking. So my second poll, just for the next bit, is I'd like to know that if you've experienced imposter syndrome, and all of you are saying that you have or do, how much has it impacted on your work life? So the choices that are going to come up for you, this is a multiple poll, so select all the ones that have happened to you. You don't have to try and select one and think, oh, what's the worst thing that's ever happened? So you can select one or more of them, or all of them if you want to. So the choices that I'm interested to know is, have you procrastinated? Have you left work to the last minute because of imposter syndrome? Have you missed deadlines because of it? Have you made excuses to miss certain meetings because you don't want to be put on the spot to be asked about something, or you don't want to have to speak to something on an agenda? Have you made excuses to avoid giving a presentation because honestly that is really not your idea of fun, or you don't mind them, but it's that being there and having to present it and be asked the questions, thinking, I don't know enough about it and I don't feel confident to do it, and someone's going to ask me a question I won't know the answer to, so I can't go. And then the most extreme one, and I had to put this in here because if this is happening to you, that you've called in sick because, or you are currently calling sick because you couldn't cope with the fear, that is a warning sign where a coach like myself would start to say, actually, you know what, I think, you maybe need to go and talk to your GP, because this is pushing you to the extremes of stress, and burnout is on the way. And they will be able to give you, some more professional help. A coach can help, but there's a limit to, kind of what we can do and what we can achieve. So what are we looking like on the results for that, Mike? What's come through?
Yeah, interesting. The bars are moving around really quickly. So at the moment, out the 5, the top one is I've procrastinated and left work to the last minute with 51% of the votes. The next one after that is I've made excuses to avoid giving a presentation at 20%, which is kind of level with I've made excuses to miss certain meetings.
Yeah.
And interestingly, there are people feeling that they've called in sick because they couldn't cope with the fear. Just shy of 10% of people. Yeah,
and that is such a horrible place to be, and such an awful place to be in. And if that is you now at the moment, like I say, I would urge you, to speak to your GP, or if you feel confident enough to speak to your manager about it, or access some occupational health support through where you're working, because work should not make you do that. Or how you feel in doing your job on a day-to-day basis should not make you feel like that. Ask for help from a supportive manager or from your occupational health service, or try and get to spend some time with your GP and see what they can do to help.
Yeah, there's 45% of people I've procrastinated and left work to the last minute.
Yeah, so yes, sorry, I'll move on that one. So the procrastination. So procrastination, very, very, very common, and I would imagine that it's gone from procrastination to not missing the deadline because you've pulled an all-nighter or you've worked at the weekend. I mean, how many of us have done that, left it right to the last minute and, worked late into the night to hit that deadline? And sometimes you can get that kind of feeling going, you almost start to persuade yourself, that I do my best work in the middle of the night just before the deadline. But you don't really. It's your imposter. It's trying to justify what you're doing to battle your imposter syndrome. Right, so let's move on with some more slides. Thank you for your honesty with that as well, everyone. Really appreciate that. And that will also help other people that are in this session as well, who might, for maybe the first time, hear admitting to themselves, that they're having imposter syndrome happening, or for the first time realizing that that's what it is, what they're thinking and feeling. So let's have a think about what it is. So we've talked about lack of confidence, not feeling very confident about your knowledge, your skills, your job, your role. We've talked about we talked about low self-esteem, but all low confidence can impact on your self-esteem. You feel quite low, quite down about yourself. You don't feel that you've got much to offer. And incompetence, you can feel that you are actually incompetent and not capable of doing this job. So in terms of imposter syndrome, so these are things that can play out, and these are things that you can feel. These are things that, you know, you can experience. But surprisingly, actually, those three things are not imposter syndrome in itself. To get to the heart of what's going on with imposter syndrome, we have to look at the brain. Our brain, our best friend, our worst enemy, depending on the time of day or the hour or the second, what is going on in there. Your brain can be, you know, reassuring you, you know, that you're, you know, that you understand something, that you're really good at what you do. And then just like that, it can be undermining you, you know, that you are terrible. All these thoughts come in, you know, you shouldn't be here, and so on and so forth. And what's going on in your brain is that you've got a core belief that is driving all of this. And this core belief is, I am not good enough. And that kind of comes from many, many places. So let's have a look. So your core belief kind of comes from lots of places. You know, it may have been something to do with you academically at school while you were growing up. It may have been something to do with how, you know, sort of your family perceived and viewed success. You know, you could start to talk about things like conditional worth and things like that. That kind of goes a little bit beyond the boundaries of coaching. But other sources that it can come from a really bad experience in a previous job. It can come from if you've had the misfortune to have a toxic manager. They leave a lot of devastation in their trail. And even if it was you that decided to leave in the end and get another job, you can still take some of the damage of that with you. You can have been in a team that had, you know, some quite toxic team members or quite judgmental people around you. So it can kind of come from a lot of places. But the key thing is to start to really, really dig down, and and that core belief is there that I'm not good enough, and that is what we need to start tackling. So there's some practical things as a coach that we would start to have a look at. So we would look at so where did this happen? Where in we look back through your jobs and do what we call kind of like a career path, if you like. Start to have a look at, you know, can you pinpoint it in any one job or any one, you know, point at which it happened? And it could be as simple as you went to deliver a presentation in front of a pretty large audience back in the day when we did these things face to face, and for whatever reason, bad day, not much report back from the audience, just a moment of brain freeze, and it bombed, and it's never left you. You know, you've kind of not been able to move on from it. Like I say, it could be a bad experience with a manager. It could be all sorts of things, but actually trying to sort of spend some time thinking about it and pinpointing where did it happen, how did it happen, what was going on, you know, and trying to, you know, draw that out. So where did it happen? How did it happen? What was it? But then you can also have a think about, well, what can I do about that? There are, you know, lots of different things that you can do. And there are lots of different ways to tackle it. So before I go around into the last bit, which is where I talk about some of the things that you can do, I just wanted to share this with you. It comes from a website called Very Well Mind, and it's when you go on the internet and you start to, you know, Google for imposter syndrome, it's very, very difficult to find practical tools, things that will help you, but you do come across some quite good graphics that describe it, and this particularly is one of my favorite, and this is, I would say, you know, to me, these are the core types of imposter syndrome, and the types, you know, that people will experience who will come and work with me. Some, you know, some people that publish say there's 8, there's 9, you know, whatever. But I think these are the core 5, and most of us can find ourselves in this situation. So we have the superhero. You're the one that works so hard, you overwork because you have to keep checking things, you have to keep redoing things, you will do that extra bit to back something up because you feel that whatever you're doing is not good enough, so you have to do more of it, but it's really, really starting to drain you. Natural genius. So natural genius is when, you know, you'll get some people who are naturally talented at something, very, very good at it, and don't particularly have to try particularly hard to do well. But then when they have to start to do something that isn't in their natural genius sort of field. So I often think back to a lady that I worked with who was absolutely brilliant at languages. She spoke about 5 or 6 languages and she was absolutely fluent. But then she would then but because she couldn't be that good at data analytics, she just felt that she wasn't good enough at it, and that she shouldn't be there and she shouldn't be doing it, because she couldn't do it to a level of expertise that naturally came to her with languages. And we're not all good at everything. So you may find yourself putting that high expectation on yourself, they have to be able to do this as, as well as I do such and such, or, something else. And you really don't. Expert, this is particularly common with people who have an expert role, and they are always worrying that they're going to get asked that question that they're not going to know the answer to. And it's okay to say, I don't know, I'll go away and find out and come back to you. So they're always studying, always taking that next course, always reading that next book, always trying to make sure that, that they're 2 steps ahead with their learning. And no one's expecting them to do that. Perfectionists, never happy with their work, fixed on the flaws, not the strengths. You get 98% in an exam, and all you care about is the question you've got wrong, and I shouldn't have got that wrong. If something comes back, you send a paper off to have your manager look over it, and they come back and go, that's really, really great. Could you just change this sentence? And the whole thing's a disaster because you've been asked to change one sentence. And the soloists who prefer to work alone. Some people, sometimes these people get a bit mistaken for people who aren't team players. But quite often what can be going on in there is that they don't want to work in a team, and they don't want to work with other people because they're afraid that will show them up. They're afraid that will, people, through that people will see, see through them, if you like. So what can we do about it? How can we tackle it? So I'm just going to go into this final stretch, and then I've hopefully left quite a bit of time for questions, so that if people have got any, I can, kind of expand on it a bit more. So what can we do about it? So know your signs. So when you're in a work situation, know what that automatic thought is that's going to pop in your head, so that you can recognize it. Know that feeling that means that you're going to start feeling like an imposter. And this is very much more so if it comes and goes, rather than you're feeling it all the time. If you're feeling it all the time, then your signs. It's like how you feel all day long at work. One of the key things, and I really, really sympathize with you if you feel that there isn't anyone that you can speak to at work, but try and share your feelings with a trusted colleague. You might not want to speak to your manager, but there might be someone at work, maybe in your team, or it may be someone else in another part of the organization, or it might be, if you've got self-refer for occupational health, just to offload those feelings and share how you're feeling. And I would bet you that pretty much most of the time, if you're sharing with a colleague, someone that knows you quite well and sees you at work and sees you how you are at work, they're going to be like absolutely stunned that you're saying, I feel like this, because they won't see you like that at all. And that's why sometimes sharing with a colleague can be really good, because they will tell you how you come across and what people think of you and what they think of you. And part of tackling imposter syndrome, if it hasn't kind of gone too far to the it's absolutely dreadful and I can't get out of bed and go to bed in the morning, go to work in the morning, they will start to do that healthy argument against it. And you can sort of take some of their words, some of the things that they say, and when you catch yourself thinking it and feeling it, you can offset it with oh yeah, but Mike said that I don't actually, that doesn't come across, or Mike said that nobody thinks that. And so you can play out that argument, answer back those feelings in your head. This will help you to catch those thoughts and question them. So saying, if you share your feelings with a trusted colleague, or a manager, someone else in your team, and like I say, it is about catching those thoughts and questioning them, and being able to put some substance to it. And I think it really helps if you can talk to someone and get their perspective and their point of view, or even if you are working with a coach, with someone like myself, you can be in a position where you just can't do this presentation, I can't write this presentation, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know, everyone's going to catch me out. And then you think, oh yeah, no, but that was one of those thoughts, wasn't it? And then coach it. And so Rachel said this, and and I talked to Mike, and Mike said this, and you can start to kind of almost get a rational argument to it and go in your head that can sometimes really, really help. Stop comparing yourself with others. Comparison, oh, terrible, we shouldn't do it, but we do, we can't help it, human nature, we compare ourselves. But try and stop if you can, or at least minimize it, because you're only seeing the outside of people, like they only see the outside of you. You don't know what they've got going on in their head. You don't know how they're feeling about it. Chances are, based, if you think back to the poll that we did about how frequently everybody's feeling it, chances are there are many, many other people in the room who are feeling the same as you, but don't want to let onto it. It is, like we said, more common than you think. Start to make some small changes and build on them. So we talked about catching that thought, starting to build an argument against them. If it's got to a real sort of serious point where you want to avoid presentations, because you feel that you're going to be standing out there and people are going to be looking at you, expecting you to be an expert. Tips and steps that have worked in coaching people is don't do it on your own for a while. Team tag, deliver it with somebody else in the team, so that you're doing it with somebody else. It's not, you don't feel like the spotlight's entirely on you. Maybe 2 or 3 of you do it, or just not having all that weight of expectation and looking at you can really help. And those can be small changes, so maybe get them to present the most of it and you just do a bit, and then slowly make it a 50-50, and then you do more, and so on, because you'd be surprised about the number of people around you who want to help. Procrastination is a very, very difficult one. I could say things like, well, set yourself a deadline that's 24 hours before the deadline, but that you know when the real deadline is. But you can try that. You can, maybe work with a colleague or a manager who will give you a shorter deadline, and not tell you that it's okay if you slip over. But ideally, we don't want to be missing those deadlines. Start to maybe break that task down and set yourself mini deadlines that build up to it. So you might be doing bits still on the last minute, but those sort of little bits will all add up to a big chunk of it being done as you get towards the major deadline. Again, it's difficult to give a very specific answer and scenario that will help you, but whatever it is, try and make some small changes. Try and find someone to work with. I wouldn't say to everybody go out and get yourself a coach, because not everybody can, but people in that objective situation can really help you and give you a lot of support. But I think one of the main things about imposter syndrome, and whilst it isn't going to make it go away, you can start to feel a little bit better about it, is that you're not alone. So many of us experience it. It comes, it goes. Sometimes we're experiencing it for a long time, and one of the things, I guess, if you're experiencing it all the time, have a think about, do you want to try and start to tackle it, or do you genuinely feel that you are actually in the wrong job? Because some of us do end up in the wrong job. I applied for and got a job once, and I've been in it about 6 weeks, and I knew that I'd made an absolutely horrendous mistake. This wasn't for me. It's nothing to do with the people or the organization. I'd just gone off on a wrong tangent with my job, and I was just like, actually, no, this is not for me. And I applied for and got another job, and spent the next few years justifying why I'd spent 5 minutes in one job. But in the end, I left it off, because after a while, you just put years on your CV, can't you? So I just missed it out in the end. We do make mistakes, and that is okay, and admit to yourself, if it's not quite the right thing for you. So I realise that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through it. By all means, pop some things in the questions, pop some things in the chat, message me through the profiles on the platform, and I will come back to you as best as I can to try and help with your specific situation. But these are general approaches that I've used successfully with clients in the past that have started to really make a difference. Use one, use several, or none, and ask me for some advice that will help you more specifically in a different way if you know that those aren't going to work for you. So that was a bit of a whistle stop tour, I have to say. I hope there's been some questions or, sort of even just some comments coming through in the chat. So Mike, if you're able to just tell me, because obviously I can't see it.
Yeah, of course, Rachel.
Just ask me questions and I'll try and cram as much as we can into this 10 minutes to help as many people as possible.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for that, Rachel. It's been great to hear what you've had to say this afternoon. The conversation's been really open and really quite, you can draw some strength from some of the comments people are making. I'll just pick out a couple from the chat and then we'll look at the Q&As. Leanne's mentioned that a manager picked it up that she was suffering from imposter syndrome a few years ago, and she hadn't actually heard of it back then. And then she looked it up and she could relate to that. And I think she said she's put it down to her background, and she's the first in her family to go to uni, the first in her family to do that. She comes from a family of farmers, so I think she's done great things. She's broken the mold, she feels, and I think her imposter syndrome's around, she's risen to a level where she feels she didn't belong.
Right. Yeah. And that is such a common feeling. I mean, and firstly, I would echo what Mike said, that's absolutely amazing. Breaking the mold is not an easy thing to do. And that takes, quite an amount of mental toughness and a lot of resilience. And potentially sometimes you're so focused on getting there that you have a moment where you kind of take stock because you've almost kind of, got there. And there's a bit of sort of, self-disbelief about it. But I very much hope that knowing that imposter syndrome exists really kind of helped you. And, brilliant for you had a manager with the foresight, to identify it and to kind of know what it is and to kind of, and I hope they helped and supported you with it a bit as well. And, helped you to kind of accept, that you're as good as you are.
It's fantastic. Thanks, Rachel. Priscilla said she felt like Del Boy. She's just winging it and not recognizing her own talents.
So yeah, and that's fine. I mean, obviously it's not particularly healthy for your stress and your mental health to be winging it all the time, but we do all have times when we're winging it, when we start new jobs, particularly when we have huge steep learning curves, and there's a lot to learn that's new, but there are things that from before, and you can often feel like you're winging it. And sometimes we get dropped in things and we're put on the spot, and we literally are winging it. I mean, I'll hold my hands up. I do things where I end up winging it. I'm sure, Mike, you do as well. So,
Oh yeah, daily. Even little things like being a parent. No one teaches you to be a parent. You kind of draw on the experience from your parents, or if you've or those around you, and I feel like I'm winging being a parent on a daily basis.
No, absolutely. It doesn't come with a manual, does it, Mike?
It doesn't, but you feel that you do make comparisons to other parents. Wow, look at the other parent, really kind of calm and collective, and there you are losing your rag every
probably go home and scream at the wall.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's that comparison thing, isn't it? Try not to compare, because we only see what's on the outside, don't we?
There is one from Janet that talked about comparisons, because she's quite new to a job role, and she looks around, the people around her, and feels that they're superb project managers, and actually she feels worried about showing herself up in front of others.
Yeah, one of the things that can be quite helpful to do as well, if you're new to an organization as well as new into a job, or either or both, is to get yourself a mentor. Mentors are great for helping you tackle some of this, because they're there to kind of sort of be a listening ear, help to give you some advice, guide you, help you find your feet, navigate politics, etc. So asking for a mentor can be quite a good thing to do in that role. And I think as well, another thing to bear in mind, I would imagine most of us here are project managers or program managers, or somewhere in between the two. And it is a really, really common thing when you start on a project, particularly in the NHS, because you turn up, the chances are, you've got consultants, you've got incredibly well qualified academic people around you, you join a project and they're all sitting there and they all start looking at you, you're the project manager. And that can be a real moment where you think, oh, but the thing that you have to remember is, you have to look at them as subject matter experts. They're there because they're expert in that subject. They're not there to judge you as a project manager. They're there to give their wisdom and their knowledge and their experience when it's needed to help the project. So it's very, very common for it to happen as a new project manager. Pretty much every new project I ever started on, I've had my moments where I've sat there and thought, oh, no. But use them. They're there to, they're there to help and they're there to support. So, see them for the experts in their kind of, we don't like pigeonholing people, but the subject matter experts, or SMEs as we like to call them, don't we? And see them for that, and that's what they're there for, and they're there to consult with, and they're there to inform and to guide, and use them.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Rachel. Interesting to hear you mention about mentoring. I have put the podcast you did in the chat for people to access about the coaching and mentoring. Yeah, no, absolutely. Your local leadership academy, all the leadership academy, they all have regions. So my particular one is Midlands. But if you go to their web pages, they all have coaching and mentoring schemes. So if you do feel that you need some coaching to help you with imposter syndrome, or general confidence, or if you feel that you need some mentoring, go there and fill in the form on the relevant site, and they will find a coach for you. They haven't got a bottomless pit of coaches, but they will try and match you up with somebody. So don't think, oh, I can't get coaching because I can't afford X pounds an hour to go and get a coach. There is a free coaching offer to the NHS. You might have to wait a little bit for it, but you may even find a mentor within within your own organisation. If you have a PMO, project program management office, in your organisation, always worth giving them an email, give them a ring. They often, if they don't mentor themselves or are full in terms of mentoring, will often know of more experienced project managers that they can put you in touch with. So it's finding that help. Wonderful. Thanks, Rach. I'm going to go to questions now. Go from the top down. What is the best way for a manager to deal with a colleague who they feel may have been experiencing imposter syndrome? So when you say manager with a colleague, I'm kind of going to make an assumption there that it's manager and someone that reports to you. So so you're going to have that sort of, hopefully, that monthly one-to-one situation. And really, it's kind of try and take a coaching approach. So don't sort of start going in with you keep missing deadlines, or you're procrastinating, or and why. Just sort of ask them kind of how are you feeling about work at the moment? How are you feeling about workload? You did a particularly good piece recently. How did you feel about that? And try and get people to reflect on it. And if they start coming out with the classics like, oh, I was just lucky, or then you can start to dig deeper. So I would advise maybe trying to get some coaching style questions under your belt, that's drawing out how people are feeling about it, and then you could say, well, oh, do you feel like that often about your pieces of work? Because that really does surprise me, because I really wouldn't have thought you felt like that. And take it step by step towards, have you ever heard of something called imposter syndrome? I think you might you sound like you've got that a bit, maybe go away and have a read of it, or or suggest some reading or some support for it, but build around to it with some coaching style questions, rather than go straight in and people feel it's like being criticized, because that's just gonna make it worse. No. It's spotted. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rachel. Are there any techniques we can apply to catch ourselves before we go into that spiral of imposter syndrome, do you think? So the technique would be the same as any technique with an automatic negative thought. It's about catching it. So it's about, and I think the technique behind it is what I was saying at the beginning about know your signs, know your thoughts, which are the ones that occur to you, and then go into that green hexagon there, catch them. So if you know what they are, you're more likely to catch yourself thinking it, and the more you practice at catching yourself thinking it, the less they will slip through unnoticed. And then you can have your counter argument with your head or your feelings ready, evidenced from that conversation with a trusted colleague, or maybe what your line manager has said. So it's practice, and knowing them is the big first step to catch them. Is imposter syndrome curable? Or do we have to learn to manage it? What's your views?
I think it depends where it's come from. I think you can learn to manage it. I think once you understand what it is and you can start to tackle that automatic kind of like negative thinking, if you like, that's coming from imposter syndrome, I think you can learn to control, learn to manage it. Sometimes it's a particular set of circumstances that are triggering it, and a different job and a different place. It doesn't necessarily affect you so much. Some people feel like it follows them all the way through their career. And I guess in that situation, I would say it's okay to have it. We all experience it. We all experience those thoughts, and it's about catching them and dealing with them. It's perfectly normal to have those thoughts. It's when it starts to really negatively affect your day and your working life that it's starting to cause a problem. I think a little bit of imposter syndrome. I think, that 10 minutes before the session today where I'm in the kitchen making a drink thinking, that can be good because it can make you means you care and you want to deliver your best. So it can have some positives. It's when it goes too far that it becomes a big negative. If whoever it is, if you want to drop me a private message through the platform, you just click on me and it'll take you to my profile, and then there's a little sort of like text box and text logo. You can send me a message and we can have a bit of a chat, whether it's after the whole event by Teams or whatever, and see if we can work something out.
Oh, that's lovely. Thanks, Rachel. We do have another 7 or 8 questions, maybe more, but we've run out of time.
We've run out of time, haven't we?
Run out of time.
Mike's going to give me the questions, and I will try and answer. I'll make sure I get answers to them before the end of the week, and then what we will do is we will pop them up as a resource. We can do that, can't we, Mike? We can pop it up as a resource.
Yeah, we can do that, Rachel.
And so if you come back and check on Friday before you finish, I'll have put some answers to the questions up that you can, download and open and have a look. But by all means, send me a message on the board as well, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Oh, that's lovely. We'll put them in the documents below the description of this.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Lovely. Thanks, Rachel. And thanks for your time and everything you shared with us today. Certainly from my view, and things I'm reading in the chat suggests everyone's taking a lot from your session. So
yeah, we could have done it all day.
I think so.
Hopefully it's a good start for a lot of people.
I'm sure it will be. So thanks, Rachel. And that puts a close to day 2 of NHS Project Futures Festival 2022. So save the best till last, I think. And we hope you've enjoyed today. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. So thanks again, and take care of each other, and have a nice evening.